if you're a healthcare professional and you've thought about changing your career, if you've thought about, not wanting to start over, not having to go back to school, and have contemplated like, what are my options? What can I even potentially do with my life outside of just doing patient care? If you're asking yourself this question, I was once in your shoes. I was asking myself this exact question, and I didn't really have a lot of great resources, a lot of great information available to me at the time. And so I did this video actually where I just ran through a lot of rapid fire questions, answering my own experience, what I went through in my career pivot, and then some things about how I navigated the process, and then also how the fellowship that I developed actually helps people successfully make that career pivot. So, you know, a lot has changed in healthcare. I can understand there's a lot of frustration. We see so many healthcare professionals from all backgrounds. I mean, doctors, nurses, therapists, techs. It's pretty widespread how it's pretty widespread how many healthcare professionals are leaving the profession. It is a little concerning to me, but it's more concerning for me that there are so many people that are stuck, unfulfilled, miserable, and that just are not having and are deciding between going back and getting a graduate degree, spending $50,000 or $100,000 on this degree, and then at the end of that, still potentially struggling and not getting a job. And to me, that's really concerning that there are so many people that are, that's their main go-to option. It's like going back to school and getting a degree. And so many things have changed. The environment that we're in is completely different. The job opportunities that are out there are different. And I don't think that's the smartest path forward. I think that there's a much better path. It's why we developed the fellowship, which I go into later. I believe it's the most important thing you can do is get experience, get your foot in the door, build a network, and gain valuable skills, especially around AI. And these are things we're going to talk about, but I'm kind of new to YouTube. This is one of my newer YouTube videos. And so basically, I wanted to introduce myself here, sort of. A lot of you probably already know me from Match Day. But if you don't, my name is Rami. I was formerly a family doctor. I worked in health tech for a few years, and I've been helping healthcare professionals pivot into new roles and, go through a proven program that helps them do that. So this first video is really just kind of an introductory on, myself, Match Day, and hopefully YouTube is going to be a new medium that we utilize a little bit more now. But welcome. This is kind of like a chopped up clip that I went through. I'm going to post it here. There's some good tidbits in there, and I also talk about my personal journey. So hope you like it. Hope it's helpful. After the video does kind of like chop out at the end because I didn't get to finish my, chain of thought in that last part. So excuse me for that. The videos will get better, but I think it's just better to post than wait and not share content. So if you like this, leave a comment. Let me know what you like, what you want me to talk more about. I'd love to, answer specific questions. And yeah, I just want to say thanks for watching, and we'll talk soon. So for me, it was kind of unique, right? So, I always had this idea that medicine was going to be, or becoming a doctor would be a stepping stone for me. It wasn't going to be the rest of my career. And I knew this pretty early on. And I feel like most people that are doing a career pivot, they have a sense of this, right? They know that this isn't their forever career. They want to grow, they want to elevate. And I knew this very early on. I actually contemplated not doing residency at all, just getting my medical degree and then, pivoting into something else. It started actually quite early for me, but it was, we all start somewhere. We all start we're in just the research phase or in the exploration phase. And typically the people that come to work with us, they're already kind of in the active phase where they've tried a bunch of things, they've done a bunch of stuff, but it hasn't actually worked.
that's kind of where match day lands. But for me, exploration phase started in medical school. Residency was like, just kind of like you're so busy, you don't have time to think about anything else. You're just trying to make it through the process. But it wasn't until COVID where I think I really had to come to terms with where I was at and what I was doing and how it didn't really line up with my future at all. And I was faced with a decision really. Do I continue to pursue what I'm doing now, which is clinical focused care? Or do I get a head start on the career that I actually want to have? And I knew someday it would be be as an entrepreneur, but I saw myself either being a health tech operator, working in pharma, doing something else, using my business acumen or leadership abilities to grow my career. So it started there. And once I came to terms with that, I actually, I dropped out of residency, which was, I've talked about extensively. That was a hard decision and a hard process in and of itself. I worked a part-time job where I was still working in an urgent care, but I was actively pursuing these other roles. And so one of the things that I did was just really amplify my networking. And so I joined a bunch of communities. Every day I would take phone calls with someone new, see how I could help them, and just, trying to be as helpful as possible. And I think what I did was I took a slightly different approach. I just wanted to see where can I add value? What can I do that's going to help as many people as I can? I didn't really do that with any expectation of getting anything back. But after doing this for a while, I caught a lucky break. Someone saw that, hey, you're a doctor, but you're also really good at communicating and doing a podcast. And, you could be really great in this director type of role. And so the first job I actually got was almost like a community director role. So it was a company here in Austin. It was called M Disrupt. And I don't talk about this role a lot, but it was my first role that brought me here. I learned a lot in that role. Ultimately, pretty quickly realized it wasn't a good fit for me. After that, I realized, I don't want to actually just be doing community directorship. I want to be, more operating, more leading a team. And I want to really be in an early stage startup because that's what I wanted to do. So I built my network here in Austin through in-person meetups, through networking events. And then I met a gentleman named Alex. He was building a startup and needed a clinical operator. And it was good timing. It was a good match. And so that was kind of the next role that I took as leading clinical operations for that startup. And so I did that for about 7 or 8 months. And from there, I started building my own community. And so while I was there, I was, helping people figure out how to do what I did. And it, Matchday eventually just kind of grew into what it is now. The pivot that I went through, there was a lot of fear involved, especially fear and uncertainty. And I think that's something a lot of people can relate to. I didn't really know exactly what I was going to need to do to get to where I wanted to go. I didn't know exactly the steps. I just knew that I was going to do whatever it took to get there. I wasn't going to just try to figure it out myself. I was going to find mentors and people that could really help me. And so in the beginning, it was a stretch. It was just putting one foot in front of the other and doing the next thing. And I figured eventually I would get there. And I actually talk about this where I, said I created my own fellowship. I really did do that. And that relieved some of the anxiety of trying to get into this other role that I had no idea how to get into. So in the beginning, it was a lot of uncertainty. It was a lot of fear. Over time, it was just building up my confidence little by little. Like I just constantly had to remind myself not to compare my journey to everybody else and I think for doctors, this is especially hard because, my friends were graduating and making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. And I constantly had to block that out and say, hey, that's not my journey. That's their journey. I'm happy for them. They're working really hard. They deserve to make that money. And, meanwhile, I'm not making anywhere near that. I constantly had to really think don't compare, just focus on where I'm going, focus on the end result, focus on, what I want to be doing. So I really had to kind of be disciplined with my mental state because I think it's really easy to just start looking at what everybody else is doing and forgetting that this is your path, this is the decision you made. So that was actually a really big mental barrier for me, is just not letting myself slip into that mentality and get stuck on all of the sunk costs, all the things I left behind. So I just really had to stay focused on my own journey. So Matchday is a company I founded because I saw that there was this massive disconnect between healthcare professionals trying to make a career pivot and then actually being successful in doing so. And so, one of the things that I saw when I was first making this career pivot was that there were a lot of job boards. There's always these postings on LinkedIn, and I saw that I would apply for them, or I saw lots of doctors or nurses or PTs applying to them, but nothing was working, right? And so I kept seeing all these companies just creating more job boards, and they're like, this is the job board that's going to help you break through, or that's the job board that's going to help you break through. And I was like, you could have an infinite amount of job postings or an infinite amount of job boards and have every opportunity just listed and laid out for you, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. The people that were trying to make a pivot still had a lot of gaps, and no matter how many jobs there were, it's like nothing was working. And so that was kind of like, for me, the aha moment is like, it's not building a job board. It's building something that helps you bridge the gap that exists between where you are right now, how you're presenting yourself, who you are, into the jobs that actually exist. Because someone's landing that job. It's just, for a lot of healthcare professionals, it wasn't them. And it was mainly, a number of things. One, it was obviously the way they positioned themselves. It was the way they were applying. It was the way they were speaking about their skills. It was the way they were interviewing. And it was the way they were just showing up, whether it was on LinkedIn or elsewhere. And so I knew from my own personal experience that I had to, one, create a new identity. I had to market myself differently. I had to speak about my skills in a different way. There were just a lot of things that were missing. And so what I wanted to create was, how do we actually fill in those gaps so that someone can go from being a nurse or being a doctor or being a physical therapist to becoming this new version of themselves. And it was about transformation. It was about recreating your identity, positioning yourself in a new way, and being successful. And that was ultimately what I saw was missing and what I wanted to create with Matchday. We go through typically a 4-stage process, and it varies for people depending on the stage that they're in. But in most cases, there is this first phase, which is called clarity. And the reason that's so important is I think a lot of folks don't exactly know what their skills are, what they really want out of life, even is out there that matches that. And so we really go through an in-depth process of creating clarity. And only from there can you really create a roadmap to success. And one of the biggest things I talk about is it doesn't make sense to just apply to any job or, spam out your resume or just hope that something sticks. That really doesn't work, and especially in this job market. It's almost like creating a vision board, right? Like we've seen people talk about, like, really have a vision for your life, have write it out, put a picture. And there is, something behind that. And the reason that works is because it creates clarity in our mind and direction. And that's what a lot of people lack. And so this is something you can do on your own, but without asking the right questions, without really having the accountability structure, without having someone really pull that out of you, a lot of the times we're not honest with ourselves. And that can be really hard. And so clarity is meant to help you become honest with yourself and honest with the situation you're in and what's possible. And so that's really just kind of like getting to know you as a person, getting to know what drives you, what motivates you, and creating like the right matching process of how do we get there and what's the strategy. And so once you've gotten that, then we can say, okay, I'm really strong in this area. These types of roles really fit what I can do. And now I've got a clear path of where I want to go. And from there, then we can work on the strategy, the transferable skills. How do I match that? How do we actually navigate the job search? Like the logistical steps all come after that. And so some people have already figured that out, and they can fast track through a lot of that process. But I still think a lot of people haven't figured that part out, and it can be a very strong foundational step for people. So that's the clarity phase. From there, we jump into the confidence phase. And confidence is about, like now we've done the work, we've figured out who we are, we figured out where we're going, we've got direction. That in and of itself creates groundedness. It creates like, that certainty that like, okay, at least I know where I'm going. I'm not just spreading myself out. And typically, when people lack confidence, it's because they lack clarity and competence. But once you've got that clarity, you can sit like more rest assured, like there's less anxiety, there's less shiftiness. It's like, okay, I figured it out. I know where I'm going. Now I just got to get my ducks in a row. And so the confidence building piece is like really now creating forward momentum. And so working on our transferable skills, creating that clarity around our transferable skills and how to speak about them, creating confidence with our profiles, with our brand, making sure it all matches up. If you're telling one story and then your resume is telling another story and then your LinkedIn's telling another story, you lose confidence in yourself because you're like, none of this makes sense, and you internally, subconsciously know that. And so confidence is about pulling all the pieces together and creating even integrity, I like to say, because integrity and confidence kind of go hand in hand. So if you think about people that are really confident, they have a lot of integrity. And that's because they have conviction around what they say. They know what they say is like held in a strong place. They're grounded and they're not lying to themselves or to anybody else. And people very quickly can see through that. And that's something we really work on building with our fellows is that place of a grounded foundation where you can go into a meeting with someone, talk about the job description honestly and represent yourself honestly and with integrity, because they're going to feel that, you're going to feel that, and it's going to show that this person, the way they talk about this job, the way they talk about themselves, they feel conviction. They know who they are representing what they can do accurately, and that can come off very, very quickly. We've all talked to someone who doesn't feel confident, and when they don't feel confident, we don't feel confident that they can do the job. People that are confident actually flip the script. They come in and they ask the questions like, tell me more about this job. What is it that you're trying to achieve? What is it that the outcome is? What does the team need from me? And what can I do to support that? And so they almost kind of come in and flip the script, and then they say, okay, well, it sounds like this is where the company is going. This is what I can bring to the table, and this is why why I'm the best person. I've done X, Y, and Z. I led teams doing this, this, and that. And actually in my day-to-day interactions, a lot of what my job was taking care of patients, creating treatment plans, and walking them through the whole process. It becomes a different energy. And we try to help our fellows reach that point where they can go into a call and really have that level of groundedness and confidence. And the LinkedIn and the resume and knowing how to navigate the job search, that's all part of building confidence. And so that's a very foundational pillar for us. Of course, you have that accountability structure, you have the job search strategy, the AI tools that we support you with, but that's just logistical steps. The real part of this is building up your confidence. The third one is the connections piece. So we say it's community and connections. We have all heard the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But that's not also entirely true. It's who you get to know. It's how do you create value for others and not just take value. Because I think a lot of what people do in the networking space is, reaching out cold or, asking for an intro, but there's no value exchange. And so a lot of what networking is value exchange. And, the best time to be networking is when you don't need anything, right? Not when you do need something. And so constantly building up your network, creating real value and relationships with others, that's something we should always be doing, not only when we're looking for a job. And so part of this is teaching that framework of building relationships, building connections, for the long term, not just for the short term. But it's also the network that we've already built. So having, fellows, previous alumni, hiring managers in our network so we can build organic relationships, and then also lean on our relationships within the Matchday network. So when we have a fellow and they're looking at a job, it's a lot easier if you do have that warm introduction or if someone could vouch on your behalf. So we try to do that whenever possible, is like leaning on our network of coaches, leaning on our community to facilitate those. And we don't just do it and say, hey, we're going to do all of this for you. We say we're going to teach you how to do it. We're going to teach you how it works. And we're going to show you step by step how to make this more possible. And yes, we're going to also support making warm referrals for you and network connections. But that's not the be all end all. It's part of the process. So connections is that third piece. And then the last piece, which is conversion. This is about being successful. So when you get an interview, being able to show up to the interview confident, being prepared ahead of time of what questions are going to be asked, how you want to answer those questions, avoiding the red flags. Missing one interview or one opportunity, that can delay getting a job by months. And so we want to make sure our fellows are prepared to actually convert. There's a lot of preparation that goes into the process, whether it's interview preparation, going back over your mock interviews that you've done with your coach, reviewing them, seeing what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong,